The two personality types INTPs are the least compatible with are the ENFP and the ESTP. And these two types aren't randomly chosen. There is a method to my madness. The type you are least compatible with is the type whose dominant function is your secondary function and whose secondary function is your daemon function. So the secondary function for INTPs is extroverted intuition, and their daemon function is introverted feeling. That makes the ENFP the INTP's unsavory counterpart. INTPs tend to find ENFPs really annoying, as they are similar but oh so different. INTPs like to paint a picture of the truth.
Pretty good, SpongeBob, but it's lacking basic construction, and your perspective leaves a lot to be desired.
Whereas ENFPs romanticize everything.
Today is a special day because I am being honored.
This makes their worldviews constantly at odds with one another. The INTP is more concerned about the facts of any given situation, whereas the ENFP views reality through grandiose, rose-tinted glasses.
Yes?
Ryuzaki, I've got good news!
Misa Misa is #1 in 18 Magazine's reader popularity poll!
Oh, I see.
What was that?
Matsuda's acting stupid again.
INTPs might also disdain the ENFP's desire to always be liked, as well as the ENFP's wavering conviction. INTPs tend to view ENFPs as spineless fools who always want to be the center of attention.
So you really want to be useful?
Yes!
Then could you get me another cup of coffee?
This annoyance, however, is one-sided, as ENFPs actually tend to admire INTPs, as ENFPs are drawn to people that sound smart. And if I know anything about INTPs, knowing the fact that ENFPs actually like them will make them feel immense guilt for their dislike of ENFPs.
All the guilt. The unbearable guilt.
The other type that INTPs tend not to mesh well with is the ESTP. This is because the secondary function of the ESTP is introverted thinking, and their daemon function is extroverted intuition. This makes the INTP the ESTP's unsavory counterpart. The main conflict between these types is that the ESTP is street smart, whereas the INTP is book smart.
The fact that they say that it's made out of pure gold makes no never mind to you, right?
You know your history.
I know my treasure.
Funny enough, the relationship is reversed this time around, as INTPs tend to admire ESTPs and even emulate them, whereas ESTPs are likely to view INTPs as dorks that spend too much time reading books.
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
Well, some people use their imagination.
It's about time you got your head out of those books and paid attention to more important things.
INTPs want to be cool, but they are aware that they are not. So they will do one of two things. Either lean into their NE to seem cool to others, or lean into their inferior FE to ruin the vibe for everyone else on purpose. Both of these come into conflict with the ESTP's desire to keep the vibes good. I've also noticed that ESTPs are drawn to FI types. ESTPs don't have very strong convictions, so they gravitate to those that do, such as ISTJs or even INFPs. However, INTPs have even less conviction than ESTPs do, so the ESTP has nothing to latch onto. Basically, what I'm saying is that most of the time, these two types are too aimless to connect on a deep level. INTPs are also more abstract, whereas ESTPs are much more concrete. To the ESTP, the INTP might as well be a 400-year-old book on cryptozoological creatures. An ESTP would have no idea what to do with such information and would find it both impractical and useless for the here and now. On the other hand, the INTP does see the value of being more present and practical, and while they rarely are these things themselves, they respect the ESTP's ability to succeed in the areas of life that they often fail in. So unless the ESTP is on an expedition to search for long-lost treasure, he's not going to care about the INTP's trivia about jungle wildlife or South American history. The expertise is only interesting to them if it yields immediate results. So I'd wager that INTPs are typically not close friends with either ENFPs or ESTPs. Of course, there's exceptions, as there are exceptions to everything, and only a midwit views exceptions to the rule as debunking the general rule, which is a nice segue into my next point. INTPs are midwits. For those not as chronically online as I am, a midwit is someone of average intelligence who thinks they are a genius. Most of Reddit is a good example of this. As far as a tendency to be a midwit is concerned, there's only one other type more likely to be a midwit than an INTP, and that is the INFJ. But I'll save that for another video. It certainly does not help the situation that YouTube is oversaturated with MBTI videos stroking the egos of INTPs by saying that they are the most intelligent personality type. To be fair, this is also a problem with INTJs as well, and while both of these types are capable of being geniuses, and geniuses do tend to be one of these two types, I also think that INTPs and INTJs are not inherently geniuses. Keep in mind that I do not view the midwit status as a permanent thing. I believe someone can be a midwit at one point of their life and mature past it later on. I certainly was a midwit myself for the longest time, so I'm not just here to laugh at INTPs. I'm saying this for constructive criticism and to help them grow. INTPs have this horrible tendency to view themselves as objective and impartial when they are not. They are also low in empathy, and yes, FI is empathy, whereas FE is sympathy. Very different things. INTPs have difficulty placing themselves in the shoes of others. Often, they have to experience something firsthand in order to understand it. But since they rarely leave their room, they experience very little. So, if not remedied, their worldview will become more distorted over time. Most INTPs are aware of this somewhat, and they certainly don't need another YouTuber telling them to go outside and touch grass. But if they don't do so from time to time, they will become a midwit. INTJs sort of have the opposite problem. INTJs learn practically nothing from their first-hand experiences, but can compensate for this with the fact that they can empathize with others. In fact, INTJs are sometimes pathologically empathetic, discussing the nuances of both sides of an issue, even when one side is clearly against the INTJ's interests. I know that I'm biased, but I actually think INTJs have a much better claim over being quote-unquote objective than INTPs do. But I also think that being objective is ultimately a character flaw anyways. To be blunt, if you're about to be murdered, you don't try to negotiate with your killer and find a middle ground to make everyone happy. But this is the type of thing that a midwit INTJ would do. Stop being quote-unquote objective and stand up for your subjective desires. You are human beings with wants and needs, and those will come into conflict with others' wants and needs. There is no way to be completely objective in a power struggle, and life itself is a power struggle. This is a lesson both INTPs and INTJs need to learn, even if it is a noble goal to strive for objectivity. That said, INTPs are perhaps more skilled at the appearance of objectivity and can definitely utilize this to persuade others. They should just make sure not to actually believe that they are objective. INTPs are great storytellers and can use this to great effect. However, if they buy into their own story and forget that it is a story, then INTPs become very close-minded and ideological. This is especially dangerous considering INTPs have an SE trickster function, so they are oblivious to their surroundings. This means INTPs are often openly hypocritical without realizing how transparent their hypocrisy is to everyone else. INTPs will share memes about being on the Sigma male grind set and have a strong anti-pornography stance that they won't shut up about. Meanwhile, they have a crippling hentai addiction and several piss bottles stacking up in their room because they can't even be bothered to leave their room to go to the bathroom. Given my criticisms of the INTP personality type, you may be surprised to hear that they are actually my favorite personality type, and that's why I say all these things. I want them to do better. Don't preach morality when you can't live up to your own standards, and also just stop assuming that you are the smartest person in the room to begin with. Also, yes, I have said in another video that ENTPs are my favorite, but I think, upon reflection, INTPs rank a bit higher. INTPs are basically perfectly designed to be an INTJ's partner in crime. This doesn't mean that I like every single INTP ever. There are plenty of them that I dislike with a passion, but in general, they are quite compatible with my own personality type. ENTPs are also quite compatible, but more so in short bursts. For an INTJ, an ENTP is better for short-term relationships, whereas an INTP is better long-term. ENTPs get bored and need multiple people to keep them entertained, but INTPs are usually fine having only one best friend. And honestly, most of the hype that ENTPs get is just as applicable to INTPs. So I'm gonna simp for INTPs for a while and talk about their good characteristics. First of all, they are funny. Everyone hypes up ENTPs as being comedic geniuses, but INTPs can be even funnier. They describe things accurately, yet hyperbolically, using such absurd exaggerations and similes that are nevertheless quite true.
I don't know how to say it, but our old pal Squidward, he's pushing up daisies.
I thought he was dead.
They rely far less on the wacky and random humor that ENTPs often employ, and more so just make witty observations.
We have a gang shooting on 3rd and Main, 3 wounded, 1 dead.
Is it me or is rap music just getting lazier?
Now obviously, the approach of the ENTP is much more appropriate for larger groups of people, but for a one-on-one type deal, I think the INTP humor is superior. INTP humor can be much more subtle, but is also much more consistent in its quality than ENTP humor.
I'm betting he's gonna swear first.
Second, INTPs can be quite attractive. Even though the stereotypical image of the INTP is basically an incel, or if talking about the female INTP, then they are the femcel, that girl in your class that always looks like she never washes her hair and is one trip and fall away from becoming a supervillain. That's the female INTP. But they can actually be quite attractive. Many may want a pretty blonde Instagram model. Honestly, I'll take the Velma over the model. And sure, that's only for the women. INTP men might just think it's over for them. But if I know INTPs, they want a long-term relationship, and that model isn't going to be very compatible for an INTP dude. In today's world, INTPs usually opt for online relationships, and while many INTPs may say they are okay with that, or even okay being alone for that matter, in most cases, I think this is more out of fear than contentment. There's nothing inherently wrong with having a long-distance relationship or going your own way, but INTP men, assuming they aren't total bugmen, are prime husband material, so they shouldn't undersell themselves. INTP men have numerous desirable qualities to women. The problem is, INTP men don't leave their room and are really insecure. But if these two things were remedied, then INTPs wouldn't be nerfed anymore, and the world just had to keep things balanced by keeping INTPs from becoming too overpowered. Third, INTPs are consistent and attentive. Since introverted sensing is their fun function, they actually enjoy routine. If you are part of that routine, you can reliably count on them, as opposed to an ENTP who will be much more unreliable as they commit to various other things and hate routine. So INTPs make for good friendships and good relationships for those who want someone who is consistent. Now maybe it's best that INTPs stay weary of ENFPs and ESTPs, as these types might find INTPs to be too clingy or just string them along. But many other types will appreciate their predictable nature and devotion to routine. I certainly do. And don't get me wrong, INTPs can be scummy. You can't always trust INTPs. However, you can trust them to be INTPs, and part of that is that their patterns of behavior are consistent. As long as you don't threaten to disrupt their routine in any substantial way, you should be able to stay on their good side. I love INTPs. They are hilarious, reliable, intelligent as long as they don't get too full of themselves, and are quite a desirable friend or partner, especially to an INTJ like myself. You know that scene in Breaking Bad where Walter is talking to Gale and says that they don't get along because he's like classical, but Gale is more like jazz?
It's as if I'm classical, but you are more jazz.
Ironically, Walter White is an INTJ and Gale is an INTP. But unlike Walter, I do think these types have good chemistry. When I encounter a good INTP, they make a good counterbalance. I'm like classical, rigid, grandiose, emotional, and a good INTP is like trip-hop, chill, comforting, yet realistic. I could certainly say a lot more about INTPs, but I will save that for future videos. I hope this video helps INTPs better themselves and helps other types understand and appreciate them much more. Our acculturation continues.